I don't think we had that last time, but it's like a forum thread as well. Or maybe we had it, just nobody
So we
really.
did. No one was really using it, and I think that that's one of those things that we will continue to work on and get more people in the chat and figure out where the chat is, and where the chat is coming from. Okay, I'm showing a broadcast side. Okay, cool.
We are live on Facebook.
Cool. We are live on LinkedIn. Hey everyone. Welcome to Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave Griffith, and Vlad Romanoff over there. Vlad will wave when he gets a chance. Today we're very excited to have our special guest, Preston Hadley, here, and you can see some of the fun things he's been working on behind him. And before we jump in, as this is a live show, we want to give everyone a couple of minutes to get in here. So a couple of community comments as we talked about last time. Wherever you guys are, like, please remember to do those things like, comment, subscribe to the show on LinkedIn, YouTube, and all your podcast platforms. The podcasts that I listen to tell me to give us 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts because that means something. Vlad and I hope one day to get to the point that we're asking people to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts because that actually means something to us. But if you guys like the show, please let us know. If you guys are on LinkedIn, please like and follow the Manufacturing Hub page. Please also like and follow all of Preston's pages, and you guys should be able to see links to them down below in the live chat as well. Again, as part of this, we want to have some updates that we want to talk about in the beginning of the show. If you guys have some updates, please feel free to send them to me. We don't necessarily want them to be pitches for any particular company, but if you guys have won some awards or are doing something interesting, please let us know because we would like to shout them out and share them with the community. So speaking of which, Manufacturing Happy Hour with Chris Lukey is having a happy hour tomorrow, March 17th. So if you guys are watching this within the first 24 hours, come hang out with Chris. I assume that I will have power and not be buried under snow in Texas 2 months in a row. So please come hang out with myself as well. I don't know if Preston or Vlad are going to be able to make it, but it's always a good time there. And BYO, whatever adult beverage or other beverage you're interested in.
It's always on my list, Dave, to comment on that last point, but it's very, very difficult to make it on that specific time, this
Yes.
time of the year. But
No, I agree. I agree. And that's how I feel for many of the happy hours that I get invited to. I attempt to make it to more than I do, but that one is on the top of my list because I remember Chris posting something about that and getting an invitation just yesterday. Let's see. So Vlad and I are planning to roll into a more regular weekly schedule. So if you guys are wondering when we're going to be live after this, we should be live next week at approximately the same time. So Wednesday, somewhere between about 4 and 5 o'clock, go ahead and check all the places to see our live events. And then we will also have a variety of guests. Speaking of guests, for everyone that has reached out to get on the show, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. We're certainly interested in having some more people on here. And then to make the viewing experience, as high quality as possible, Vlad and I are going to be rolling into some more themes or mini series, and you guys will hear more of that in the coming week. We're very excited to talk about manufacturing intelligence or all things manufacturing data coming up, and getting some guests who may or may not know that we will be knocking at their door to do that. And one last thing, if you guys are watching live, please go ahead and find all of the information for Preston, Vlad, and myself in the chat streams, or at least they should be in the chat streams. So speaking of which, I'll let Preston finish taking his drink. So speaking of which, welcome to Manufacturing Hub with myself, Dave, and Vlad. We have an exceptionally special guest, Preston Hadley, on the show today from Envision HQ, which if you're watching live, you will know it's got that dark blue and that orange, which every time I feel like I look at my LinkedIn feed, we see some other like bright orange and dark blue. And I love it, Preston. I was thinking to myself, when was the first time that I met Preston? And I don't really know. I cannot really remember a time that I have not seen Envision, automation and controls, in my LinkedIn feed. And I think we are all the better for that. So welcome to the show, Preston. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess my experience with Preston. So I think we've connected quite a few years ago, and we've exchanged a couple of, I think, questions and answers based on some of my content. But I've been following you very closely, and I think in the last, year or so, you've grown tremendously. You've built your own company. You were sharing posts about, the construction, the site at the very beginning. I think it was just a field that you were just starting to envision, per the name of the company, something much bigger, and here you are now in the fully constructed office with a lot of really cool hardware in the background that we're going to speak about. But I think to kick us off, for those who are not familiar with what you do or what you've been up to the last year, could you give us a little bit of an introduction and talk about what it is that you do, what's it's like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually worked for another systems integrator when I got started back in 2017. Shortly thereafter, in 2019, I started Envision, automation and controls. And the first year I did a lot of subcontracting. And in fact, a lot of the work that we do is still a lot of subcontracting for other systems integrators, a lot of on-site stuff, commissioning, startup, and of course, panel fabrication. You can see the panel shop in the background there. But for the last year, we've been starting to go more direct with customers, trying to continue to work with our systems integrator partners, but also build that direct customer base that we can bring a lot more value to. So, yeah, a big part of that was getting the shop up and running. For the first year of the business, I worked out of my apartment. Just absolutely bluntly, that's what I did, and of course, you've seen the service van. That was my step number 2 out of the apartment, was into the service van. And boy, that thing's seen some miles now. But yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I think that's the very cool aspect of, especially in systems integration, because a lot of times you see kind of the end result, like once you've actually made it and you have all these big projects, but you never get to speak with, or at least like I've never met anybody who shares their experience from very early on. And I think seeing you go through that journey was like not only inspiring for me, but was like incredible to see, like from like the humble beginnings, and here you are with like robots behind you that are worth in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's a really interesting story. But I want to also, I guess, ask you about your background. So we've talked about this a little bit, but how did you get into controls? Like, how did you learn? Because again, I think me and you come from a very different space when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So years and years and years ago, when I came out of high school, I was kind of geeky and IT related. I did a lot of programming. I worked part-time with my father in his machine shop. It was adjacent to an IT company, and they did Dreamweaver training. I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of Dreamweaver from Adobe. It was a what you see is what you get text editor for building web pages. And so that was my launching pad into programming. And over the years, I just went into IT, web development, graphic design. And so, a number of years later, I think in 2012, I worked for an IT company doing systems architecture and stuff like that for a lot of school systems. So jump ahead a number of years, like 5 or 6 years into 2017, a gentleman who knew my father noticed some of the skills that I had and just took an interest and decided to mentor me in controls. I mean, it was very strange and kind of serendipitous how it happened, and it really tended to work out right in the end. We're still good friends to this day. He does a lot of great work. We still work together, but he's seen something in there. I think he had IT skills back in the day, and he just seen a similarity or a commonality there, and took a very heavy interest in where I was going to be going as a young man in my mid 20s. And so fast forward to today, you know, quite a bit of that carries over. You know, I still do continued education. One thing people don't know about me is I'm not formally educated. That might surprise most people. I know a lot of guys that have come through both channels, and that's certainly fine either way you want to go. But that's something that surprises most people, I would say.
I'm curious about that process, if I may inquire a little bit more. So, like,
Yes.
when you, I guess, got your mentor, like, how was that? Like, how was your training like? Were you immediately kind of sent off to the field and you were working on some project? Was it very hands-on, or did he, you know, kind of train you on a few things like in the lab first? Like, what was that atmosphere like? And maybe, you know, some like positives and like negatives of that,
Sure.
if you can.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you asked that. It was quite a journey. Actually, in the beginning, we really just sat down and focused on methodology before we ever really touched the PLC, which was wonderful. He had a different way of thinking about things and breaking things down psychologically than I have prior to me meeting him. And so, in order to solve the problem, we just broke it down chunk by chunk, and all these pieces started fitting together. Well, it was a short while thereafter. He did send me on a few little things that I could figure out myself. But mostly, I'd say for the first couple of months, I was going with him side by side to these service trips, right? We did a lot of service work, still do a lot of service work to this day, actually. But we would troubleshoot PLC programs, wiring, this pump's not working, or, you know, this PID is not right. So we would do that. And that's really where I gained a lot of my hands-on knowledge. But actually, there was much less time spent in the lab than you would think with my mentor. He gave me a Micrologix 1400 with EIP, and that was what I started with. And I went home and I tinkered and I built a lab similar to what you have behind you, not quite as equipped, but that's really where I did a lot of my off hours tinkering and learning and trying to break stuff. And that's really where I gained quite a bit.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's I guess a very interesting way of doing things. And I guess like although I come from a much more traditional space, right? I went to I get my bachelor's in electrical engineering. I still see that the best people, or I guess like the most, how to say it, like invested in a certain discipline, typically come from I guess like traditional backgrounds, because I think the drive to succeed, you know, that gives you kind of the ability to learn all that and absorb it, is going to be outside of school, right? So again, like, not want to dive into like my history, but school at that time, I wasn't fully like aware of what I really wanted to do long term, right? So it was kind of a period of where I was trying to still figure things out. So I was not completely like invested in my learning, versus if you do it on your own, I feel that you are fully invested, that you really like the field, like you've selected it for a reason, right? Because you're putting in your own resources. And that's, again, from what I've seen, the best usually people in the field, the best programmers typically come from a non-university or non-traditional background. So big kudos to you, because I know how difficult it is, because there's software and hardware that you really need to master, right? Like even something as simple, or I guess like that we think is simple, as tuning in a PID loop, you really need to understand not only the process, but you also need to understand the hardware and like the software aspects in addition to that. It's really difficult to teach, even like in a school environment. Like my university didn't have any of those aspects. So
no, you're absolutely
very
right.
big.
Yeah.
So Envision automation, I guess like I'm curious to you know, to your maybe current projects, if you want to talk about what you've done since the beginning, but maybe also dive into what you have behind you, obviously without any proprietary information. But you know, what have you been up to? What kind of projects, challenges have you been solving?
Yeah, well, I would say primarily from day one, I have solved problems for OEMs and systems integrators, as I mentioned earlier. And as you can tell from my LinkedIn and other social media, my van is all over the country. So, yeah, one of the most common projects you'll find me on is at an equipment installation where the code is 75% or so done and the machine is in pieces, and we need to get it together, commissioned, and started up. So, that could mean days or weeks or maybe even months on site in West Virginia or Florida or New York, California. I've done projects out there. But some of my more particular projects, I know you want to hear some specifics because we like to talk down in the weeds on this. I did assist one of my great partners. They're a systems integrator. They're an amazing company. They do a lot of work in the heavy material handling industry. And I went out to California in 2018, and they put a big feeding system in at a cement plant out just north of Los Angeles, about an hour. And that was a pretty unique project just from the scenery alone, because it was right on the line of vegetation and desert. It was pretty definitive. It was pretty amazing. That was a large project where you're dealing with large components, big motors. And I've done a lot of big projects like that for them. And you get out on site and there's things that you're completely and utterly unaware of when you get there. You've never seen this project, you've never touched this project, but you have to get it going, ultimately get it up and running. And that's a lot of the projects that I do. Some more specific projects lately, we've been doing a lot of safety stuff for a local company here in the area, where we've been putting in a lot of, for example, laser safety scanners from like Keyence and SICK and stuff like that. So we're going through and doing like risk assessments and validation and these kinds of things on these local plants, because their safety is to us, it's a big issue, and it should be to them too. Right. But certain things get glossed over for 10, 15, 20 years or more, and then someone almost gets hurt, and we get the call to go in there and figure it out. So the project behind me, this is actually something I can't speak about, but nonetheless, it's a really cool robot, right? So we'll see what happens with that. I'm not sure if there will be any social media interaction with that at all, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate, that a lot of these projects, and I'm very familiar with that too, that once you go to a customer site, pretty much everything is proprietary to an extent. So it's very difficult to reveal some of that information. I get questions about, why am I not sharing some of the programming that I do? But ultimately it's because it's difficult to reveal some of that information. But I'm curious, so you've mentioned that, you visited different sites, different plants. I'm curious, what's your take on, the different industries when it comes to, let's say, control systems, and how do you tackle, let's say, going to a cement plant and then going to like a food and beverage plant? Like, how do you absorb the process information that is, I guess, required to install some of those systems? And especially, I guess, like your company is, like, are you trying to maybe target or segment in a certain industry, or are you just like fairly broad at this point? Like, how does that work?
Sure. So I'll break those two questions out. So the first one was, when I go to, for example, a cement plant, they have conveyors in some of those plants that are miles long, are controlled by one big, 350, 400 horsepower motor. It's kind of strange if you've never been in, the heavy material handling industry. You'll hit start on the control panel. You don't have time to go up that mile or 2 mile long conveyor to make sure it's clear like you do an assembly machine, where you say, hey, I'm downloading to the PLC, or I'm getting ready to cycle start. So really, it was kind of strange to me when one of the plant managers said, just hit start, the horn will sound for 10 seconds, they'll get out of the way. I was like, oh my gosh, what are we? So that was a shock, because I'd not worked in that industry as much. But then going back to something like automotive, automotive assembly in particular, it's very a safe environment, and everything has to follow strict protocols. The second question, though, that you brought up about where am I trying to target, what specific industries? Well, because my customers are a lot of SIs and OEMs, I get drug all over the place. And so it kind of makes it hard for me to target a particular industry. I'll say I've probably done most of my work in automotive through my OEM system integrators and my direct customers. However, I'll say what I'm really trying to target is machine retrofitting and breathing new life back into older equipment. And I know that's, you may have asked that or getting ready to ask that, but yeah, that's something I'm trying to target. What particular industry yet? I'm not exactly narrowed down where we're going with that yet, but we've done quite a bit in the plastics industry with retrofitting. So extruders, extrusion saws, puller conveyors, and things like that.
We've got a technical question coming in from David, and I guess we've kind of discussed this a little bit in the past, but Preston, what languages do you use when it comes to PLC programming, and do you have a preference? And I guess for IEC standards, and then ladder function blocks, ST,
Mhm.
um, sequential function charts. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I can tell you about 98% of anything I've ever touched has been ladder.
Mhm.
That's just what you do when you're in service. Everything's there. It's been there for 15, 20 years, maybe even 5 years. It's in ladder. I've done a little bit in structured text. I'd love to do more in structured text. It kind of reminds me of programming microcontrollers from that perspective in like C++ or something like that.
Yep.
But I kind of like ladder. I think ladder's good. Ultimately, would structured text be better for us? Probably. In a lot of ways, I think it would make things easier. But we can't just think about ourselves. We have to think about the maintenance teams in these plants. Most of these maintenance teams are guys who graduated up through the electrical hierarchy from, apprentice to journeyman to master electrician. And these guys, not all the time are they duly equipped to go through and understand structured text and some of the more complicated programming languages that we'll work with,
Mhm.
and some of the more complicated ladder functions too. So what I honestly try to do to my very best ability is build it specifically for the guys in the plant who can understand it.
Yeah.
If there are more advanced guys there, we may be able to try to pull some things off, and write some custom AOIs and, write some documentation where they can understand it. But truthfully, I try to stick to ladder because that's what all the maintenance teams know. I'd rather not tie myself with a boat anchor to every customer site I've ever been to by using something they don't understand. Not that I don't like going back and servicing our customers. I think that they should be able to help themselves in time of need if I'm not available.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good quality from like a systems integration standpoint. And I guess as a very good segue to our next to my next question, I guess it's you don't only provide a systems integration service, you actually equip those guys with the tools they need, right? So you actually go out and you have your own training kits that you bring on site, and then you do demos, you help them understand some of the programming. I don't know if you dive into the exact programs that you did, but you train them obviously on the skills they would need to service some of the equipment that you would install or somebody else has installed too, right?
Yes, absolutely. And for a great number of maintenance personnel, we have a training center, which is also just behind that wall behind me there, where we do basic PLC training at the maintenance level, for them to go in and understand potentially if they have to branch around something or if they have to troubleshoot something, they will know how to, navigate the PLC program, how to communicate with the PLC, back it up, not wipe out a program, those kinds of things. So, yeah, I think it's very important to educate the end user as best as you possibly can. Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely could not agree more. Dave, do you have any sorry, I've been taking all the stage time. Do you have any questions for Preston that you want to jump in with?
No, no, Vlad. I have learned when you are on a roll, I should just let you keep going because you just ask absolutely fantastic questions. But no, thank you. So I do have a question, Preston. So you talked about how you do a lot of commissioning work and how you're moving to doing more machine retrofits, as we can see behind you. Is that something that you found a demand or a need or a value add from your customers? Or I guess the better question is, how did you move from doing all this commissioning work to building this beautiful facility and getting into machine retrofits?
Yeah, I think it was a demand from my customers.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, it was something that was kind of happenstance. We were asked to do the project, we did it, and I realized an incredible need in the market for that. I don't think that every company should have to go out and spend the massive amounts of money they need to buy capital equipment. If they could simply just repurpose the equipment that they have, even if that means, of course, a complete gutting of the controls package, that's fine. But is going as far as to even do a tooling package on the machine to retool it and spend a quarter or a half of the cost they're going to spend on new equipment with the same efficiency. That would be phenomenal for anybody, I think. But yeah, how we got into that through commissioning and startup. So a lot of the retrofits have come through our direct customers. So our direct customers, typically they may not have the budget at the time, especially during COVID. They normally would have dropped a bunch of money on a machine, but they couldn't. So they said, what can we do to get this up to power for much, much less money? So that was kind of, again, it was very happenstance, and we just kind of segued into that. And really, I enjoy the work. We've done some projects from scratch, kind of like an OEM. I'm not really interested in doing a whole heck of a lot of that. There's a lot of OEMs out there building equipment from the ground up. Cool work. I do a lot of work for them. I'm not interested in doing that as much. I would like to take and breathe new life into the old equipment and service their existing equipment.
Preston, we've got an interesting comment question on LinkedIn from David Rojas. So, Preston, have you hired employees? Do you find it difficult to find qualified individual to do this type of work? And I know this is also an interesting segment because I saw that you posted, I think, that you're also helping like place people either on like contracts or you're hiring individuals. So if you want to expand on that kind of venture as well, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm absolutely looking to hire. I've been looking to hire for, I'd say, about 2 months now, ongoing. I will say, yes, it's difficult. It's difficult to find people, people who are also, I mean, I do a lot of commissioning and startup work. So to find people that are willing to do that travel and do it consistently, that's another challenge, of course. Only someone like me might say, hey, I'm going to travel all the time. You know, I have no problem with it. But not everybody has that personality type. So yes, it's difficult. Going into your next question about placing people, that came out of a necessity from customers who needed additional resources for commissioning and startup. And, you know, said, hey, well, we've got you on site. Do you have anybody else? Okay, yes, I do. So I would reach out to the guys that I knew and, of course, then start to build up a list of contractors that needed work. And that's kind of how the control staffing thing started. And that's not nearly as busy or nearly as, I don't know, proactive as the automation and control side of things, of course. But it's definitely helped out a good number of contractors over the last 2 years, and my customers have benefited from it greatly.
I mean, you might be able to sway me with a van. You know, that's like I've never had, and I always, you know, I could never drive from place to place. Would always have to like fly, and I think that adds like a whole bunch of like overhead to to the travel. But no, I mean I think that's been a problem in the industry for many you know, large companies, small companies, what have you. Just finding people that can do the job. Like honestly, I think, you know, the headline is always we want to look for the best talent is somewhat overused because we want people who are committed to the work, who are able to do you know, what is required and can show up, because I think manufacturing in general is or requires some flexibility, right? Like you mentioned, startups, and like those could be, you know, 10-hour days, just like they could be like 16-hour days. Like it depends on the customer, it depends on the industry, it depends, you know, there's a crunch time period and then there's maybe like a slower period.
That's right.
So it's definitely a challenge. But how I guess if we want to dive into like the interviews, or like how are you searching for people, how are you, like what are you looking in candidates? Just curious maybe on that process as well.
Yeah, so it might surprise you. I'm not necessarily looking for somebody with a college education, much like myself. I'm looking for someone who might be quite trainable, you know, someone who's looking to get into the industry. You know, I won't move into to one of our next points, but I'm constantly looking for guys who are hungry to learn this stuff. And, you know, a lot of them are apprentice electricians who want to get into controls. They work with it every day, you know, they touch it, but they don't get to actually do it. And I think that a lot of those guys are trying to segue into that industry, but they don't necessarily want to go through the 2 or 4 years worth of schooling. You know, they're saying, well, we've learned a lot on site and I'm a hands-on guy. So that's kind of where I think a lot of that's coming from. But, you know, I think that when it comes to what I'm looking for somebody who wants to learn. And that's really, if you have the drive to learn something, and you're going to go home and tinker on it after hours, and you're going to wake up excited to get going the next day, you're going to go far. It's all about the drive.
How would you say, I mean, so looking maybe from an outside perspective, how would you say that people could demonstrate that drive, right? So I think there's quite a few people, let's say on LinkedIn, trying to land maybe like even, university students who are doing their 4 years bachelor's degree, and I get this question quite often, what can I put on my resume without having maybe the exposure to manufacturing? Or, they might be like an operator, an electrician, or a mechanic. How do I expose and like demonstrate that I am willing to take that next step in automation and controls? Like, what would you kind of recommend for them?
Sure. I'd say the first step, I know it's the hardest one, but if you can get your hands on a Micrologix PLC or a Siemens, S7 1200 PLC for a couple $100, do it. Get the cheap licenses, get on it, and start playing around at night with it. Because I'll tell you what, if you go to, and I'm going to do a plug here if you don't mind, but if you go to Solus PLC, what a great place to get knowledge without having to go to college. I know that rhymes, but it's true. So okay, like if I'm looking for an employee, okay, if they came to me, Vlad, and they said, well, I've completed these courses at Solus PLC or wherever else.com, okay, I've written these programs, it's fully learnable at home. You don't have to go through college to learn those basic courses. Do the courses, do some examples, tinker around, and you come to me and say, listen, here's my course certificates, here's some examples of things I've tinkered on, I've played around in AutoCAD, whatever the case is. If you can show me that you've taken that first step and that you're hungry, that's what I want to see. I don't want to really hear that you're interested. I want to see that you're interested.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and I guess I certainly appreciate the mention of Solus PLC, but there's a lot of great resources, right? We've got Tim Wilborn from TW Controls in the chat as well. Like I know Tim has a lot of great resources, and not only we kind of specialize on courses, but he does some of the hardware as well. Some of the kits that you've mentioned can be not only getting a small PLC, but a couple of things as well from Tim. But I think it's important, I guess that's kind of the advice that I give people too, is complete a couple of projects, build something that you're proud of and that you can speak to, you know what I mean? Like you can explain certain things, you can demonstrate. And I think for me, like enthusiasm shows. I don't know if I guess like if you kind of remember the sort of the memorable interviews, but people are kind of excited to show you what they've actually built. And I think like that's, I guess, the type of people that I would be drawn to. And the only way to demonstrate it is to actually build it and kind of enjoy the process. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. I'll frame this from another teacher. I actually took Paul Lynn's course way back when I was getting going through Udemy at the time. And, he said something that was really phenomenal. He said, listen, he said, you do this course. He said, you can go into your interview, bring your laptop, open your laptop, prove to them that you know what you're doing, and look through the program and say that you know this and show them. And that's really a great way. If you can show me, whether it be through just popping open a laptop or doing an assessment test that I give you, if I can see that you know some stuff that you could learn through these courses, then I know that you've done some work. And I know that you're going to continue to do some work to get where you need to be with your knowledge.
Yeah. We got a really good comment on LinkedIn from Hank Pruim. Sorry if I mispronounced that. It says, honestly, I enjoy the travel part of my job. I guess it depends on which stage of the life you're in. He says, I've met so many interesting people and made many friends on the road. Definitely. It's an excellent profession. I've gone from electrician, sorry, my feed just scrolled up, to doing automation full time now. I encourage the young people to dig in, show interest, and you'll go far. And I think that really kind of summarizes what, the sentiment that both you and I have, Preston, as well. I think it's a very challenging job in many ways, but I think if you show perseverance, there will be more than enough people who are willing to, I guess, like not only take a chance on you, but willing to teach you, train you, and mentor you in certain situations and kind of help you out along the way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you what, he makes a great point. When you're out on the road, if you have a family, and I do have a family, I have a stepdaughter and a girlfriend, a lovely group of girls. I've been with Jessica now for 4.5 years. And I'll tell you, it's not easy being on the road when you have family. It's probably not easy being on the road, even if you don't have a family, unless you just love it. Okay. But yes, you meet amazing, great people at these plants, and you make great connections at a core level, not just a professional level, but I think at a human level. And You know, this community in particular is so small. I don't think people truly understand. I've been all the way out to California and all the way to New York and Florida and met people that connect, you know, make the connection across those states. It's ridiculous. Like, hey, I think I know that guy. Yeah, we worked together way over here in Kansas or here in Kentucky on a project 20 years ago or 5 years ago. And so you meet a lot of amazing people. You learn a lot of great things from people. And truthfully, a lot of the people that I make great connections with are the operators of the equipment that I'm typically working on or servicing. And that's another thing is I think that this is something that I've enjoyed more than anything is getting to the root problem of whatever the customer is complaining about, whether it be a machine that's malfunctioning or something that's tripping or frying. I get a lot of feedback from the operators. You know, they're going to give you the truth. They're going to tell you because they're there every day. And so when I go to a plant and I get that list from the plant manager, plant supervisor, line supervisor, I listen, I take my notes, and I work my way down the chain until I get to the operator and I say, what's your idea on all of these? What's really happening in front of you every day so I can compare it to what the plant needs to be or what they need done. And typically you find a lot of little hidden low-hanging fruit with the operators. And so I've worked closely with those guys over the years, and you typically build really good friendships in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and I think that's a very elusive skill that's not always, explicitly mentioned for a control systems, whether it is technician or engineer, but the ability to connect with people on a human level, because ultimately the machinery, I think, functions in a certain way, but then you've got a whole human aspect that people sometimes forget, right? And if you are a quote unquote PLC programmer, you might be always inclined to say, well, like the problems in the software, the hardware, whatever. But a lot of times you'll get more clues from just talking to people and kind of getting to know them than by going in the program and trying to go through the sequences. And that's a very important skill that I feel a lot of entry level, per se, I guess, engineers or technicians don't fully grasp. And I'm happy that you brought it up and expanded on it. But let's I guess you had mentioned a S7 1200 series PLC that one can get their hands on, and I think as we discussed, I think one of the kind of misses on my end has been to not advertise one of the giveaways you had done earlier this year. I believe it concluded, correct me if I'm wrong, but late January to early February.
Correct.
Yeah, and so the I guess the initiative was to give away a PLC, an HMI, and I think some software came with that as well. Yeah. And one of the, well, I guess the lucky winner of that giveaway was a person that was an electrician, I think, and trying to get into controls while working a full-time job with, a family to provide for, and was, I guess, struggling. If you want to give us the story, because I think that's an important way to kind of give back to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So the winner was Jason Rice. And again, it was a very random generated winner. And thankfully it landed on somebody who was in the middle of their college education. I think he was going for electrical engineering or controls engineering, one of the two. And he was the perfect candidate. The reason I started the giveaway was I wanted to give somebody the chance. I had a gentleman take the chance on me and just kind of scooped me up out of whatever I was doing and said, here's a PLC and here's some information. And he would sit there and just talk to me, man, for hours about the methodology behind these things. Not necessarily just, hey, just punch in a few things and this is how this works. He would say, but this is why we do it this way. Mm-hmm. I know I can't give that to everybody and everyone can't give that to everyone else, but at least I could give somebody some kind of head start. Give them the ability to tinker in their home after hours if they're really passionate about what they do. So that's really how it started. I wanted to give someone a leg up. And I was thinking, well, an apprentice electrician or someone who's going to school for engineering, something like that, or perhaps someone who's not even in school or in electronics, they just want to learn. I know of a number of people like that. So Jason, he said a few things regarding winning. He was very fortunate and very happy that he won I think he's got a good number of children. He's going through school. He was working a part-time job, and so for him, it was a huge deal that he won. And it also just some of the media exposure gave him quite a number of good connections that I think you guys know that landed him a job within a few weeks of that post. Just through the power of LinkedIn, very organic. So for him, he went from going to school to winning a PLC to landing a full-time job. I mean, that was incredible within I think it was maybe a couple months span there, the first quarter of the year. So for him, I guess you could say it somewhat changed his life. At least I hope it did, directly or indirectly, right?
No, I think definitely. I think, as we discussed earlier in the stream, is that it's really difficult to kind of afford some of this equipment, right? Like what's sitting behind me, for better or for worse, I was only able to afford because of Solus PLC / some of the previous contracts that I did. But at the end of the day, buying some of this equipment as a student, especially, the higher end brands, the Allen Bradleys, the Siemens, it's extremely difficult, right? It's not something that just anyone can pick up and go. And I think it's a little bit unfortunate that there's such a, I guess, not just the learning curve, but also the price curve, right? That one must commit to, whether, again, if you go back to school or if you buy your own equipment, it's just extremely expensive in general. We do have a question, though, on our previous point when it comes to like hiring. So the person asked, how do you showcase projects, right? Like if you work on developing something after hours, how do you showcase those projects? Do you recommend LinkedIn, GitHub? Can you utilize GitHub for PLC projects? To which, like, I can actually respond to the last section. You can upload your PLC programs to GitHub, and I know that a number of companies have like their own solutions, and I think there's even a startup that's trying to build a better GitHub for PLCs. But what are your thoughts, Preston, on how do you showcase some of these projects? Do you post photos, videos? Do you post like screenshots of your maybe PLC code? What do you recommend?
I think a screenshot of the code is amazing. I think that right there would speak volumes. And I think for a lot of people, a photo, video, screenshots, do it all. Why not? I mean, you can put 3 and 4 photos and videos in one post. I prefer to see something. I get my hands on things. If I can see it, I can understand it. I can get a good idea of its quality or of its function. Whenever I would tinker in my apartment after hours when I first got going, I'd take videos. I mean, I have, a couple of buttons as inputs and then a couple of LEDs as outputs. And I would, even if it was just making those lights flash back and forth at 100 millisecond pulses, which burned them up, which was hilarious. But I even had them down to 50 milliseconds and just toasted them. But I took videos of that stuff. I stored all of that on my phone because to me, I was just like, that's so freaking cool that I can do that. And or hey, I can make a combination of these inputs, do this. And so I would take those videos, and if I would have posted any of them to LinkedIn, today anyway, I'd be mortified to see that, but just because I'm a critic, right, of myself. But when I see people post on LinkedIn the things that they're tinkering around with at home, I love it. I think everybody does. Everybody sees that it shows your passion, again, which your passion can override your particular skill level at that point in time, right? If people can see how passionate you are, that comes across. But yeah, absolutely. Post it. I don't care how grainy the video is, just post it. Get some interactions, get people to give you feedback. And if you're doing something, you're going to have guys who've been in the industry for 20, 30 years come in and say, yeah, well, we've always done it this way. I like what you're doing. You're a newbie, but try it this way. I mean, the interactions that you'll get, showcase, whatever, just post it. Everyone likes it.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I guess I personally like to see people's take on, different things or different ways of doing things. So when they post things and then they explain like, well, I had a different idea of doing it like this way. And for sure, there's always going to be a lot of comments that, either disagree with that methodology. But at the end of the day, I think like it gets me thinking and, seeing a problem or a similar, how to say, like challenge with a different set of eyes is always I guess like the word is not refreshing, but like it's a different perspective that gets you thinking. And even if you've been in the field for 20 years, there have been technologies released in the last like 6 months that are completely changing the way of doing things. And I think if you're like trying to enter the industry and you're showcasing some of those, especially like technologies and new ways of doing things, even if you are maybe called out by the quote unquote veterans, I think you're still giving a new perspective, a different way of thinking, and you are ultimately giving people ideas on how it can be done, right? Like that's, in my
Absolutely.
opinion, very important.
No, absolutely. The conversation on LinkedIn around the content that people are putting out, whether it's a business like myself, I put out a lot of business content. But if you've noticed, I kind of flutter some stuff kind of behind the scenes stuff on my personal page all the time. And more so back in the day than I do now. But I can tell you that by posting that stuff, you're intriguing the veteran guys who've been in the industry. You're intriguing guys. You may have only been in this for a year or two. You're intriguing people who are just now getting started. Okay, you're creating an aura or a space around you for conversation around what you're doing. So if you want to learn at a rapid pace, if you want to get noticed by employers a little more frequently, showcase your stuff just by posting it. Post frequently and post often. That's what I would say to that gentleman.
Preston, I certainly don't want to put you on the spot for the next giveaway, but I'm curious, are there any plans maybe for Envision to do something of the sort that you had done in January and, create something for the community when it comes to maybe a PLC giveaway? Is that maybe in the works or in the plans?
Yes, sir. So my initial plan was to kind of pilot that, see how that would go. And it went really well. And we got a lot of people. In fact, we had over 1,000 entries. We discussed this just a few days ago, I think. The public only seen about 300 something entries, I think. But we had over 1,000 actual entries, but we just had 700 or so that weren't registered. So we had a lot of people that were interested in winning. So yes, we're going to do it quarterly, I think, going forward. I'm not sure how long we'll do that. I'm thinking 2021, we'll do that every quarter. We'll kind of have to reassess that going 2022, but I think it's an incredible opportunity. There's plenty of up and coming bright people that could use it. And really, if you think about it, one for Q2, 3, and 4, that's only 3 people that are going to win in 2021 other than Jason Rice. So yeah, we're definitely going to do that quarterly. I think it's going to be towards the end of each quarter. And the reason I did that was going into December of 2021, it'll be kind of like a Christmas gift for whoever wins, it'll be towards the tail end of the month. I mean, it's Christmas anytime you get to pop open a PLC out of packaging. So,
yeah. And I think it's important to mention, when I had seen your giveaway, right, I had to make the realization that although like I may want to get my hands on an extra piece of hardware, I perhaps wouldn't be the right person or the target audience for such a giveaway. And I think it's very important to emphasize, as we discussed through the stream, is that the ultimate target is someone who's looking to get into controls, who's truly willing to like invest the time to learn, and who needs that extra helping hand because of the expensive, hardware and software. So I think it's important to emphasize as well, who the target is for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No,
Dave, what are your thoughts?
No, I would agree with that, and I think that you guys have talked about, all of the high points of the Change Your Life giveaway, and that was certainly something we wanted to highlight with Preston being on here. And similar to what Vlad was saying, I saw the giveaway. I think I shared the giveaway a few times, and as much as I would love to from the new box and get the new PLC plastic smell, it's one of those that I'm happy that it went to a person in need, and hope that the future giveaways do that. I know we've got some Siemens folks in the chat. I know we've got some other folks in the chat. If that is something that you guys would like to help provide PLCs to be given away in some form or fashion, either through Preston or either with Vlad and I, to continue people opportunities, please feel free to reach out. That is certainly something that, as we've discussed, I think we've all bonded over. If we can give people a chance, the most that we can do is give people a chance, and being able to send out some hardware is better than being able to put together a couple of podcasts, or being able to put together kind of a list of, you should go take a look at these places. And at least for me, I'm a hands-on learner. you can type as much as you want into the simulator, but as Preston was saying, like seeing those lights go on and off, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And, taking the wires and little controls, that's when electronics really started to make sense to me, as opposed to just code. And so, if anyone is interested on the distributor, on the OEM side of being part of that, please feel free to reach out. And that would be good. But no, I think that's very exciting. And Preston, as I believe I mentioned in the beginning, it's certainly something that we will go ahead and publicize. That is very much one of those community things that we want to make sure that we get out at the very beginning of these shows all the time.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yep. There's been, I guess, a number of comments. I don't know, Dave, if you were able to catch up with them, but people mentioned a couple of great resources. So plctalk.net, which is a very popular forum to get answers. Actually, like I was extremely active there when I was doing a lot of travels. And I even remember, I guess, kind of a side funny story. I wrote a solution to one of the problems, right? Because it wasn't there. So I wrote like a response on how to figure it out. And I think it was like one of the message sequences between PLCs. And then about like 6 months later, I was stuck doing the exact same thing and I couldn't figure it out. So I Googled the same string and found like my own answer. And like I followed the solution to like my own problem that I had figured out 6 months before. But people said, so mentioned a couple of things. So there's going to be ignition, SCADA, HMI. So they do have an excellent training. People talked about code assist. So code assist, for those of you who are not familiar, it's an IAC language that is platform agnostic. So there's a number of different hardware platforms that it can run on, including like the Raspberry Pi. You can get a $5 Raspberry Pi Zero and pretty much practice with code assist. And I guess my opinion, and feel free to jump in on this, Preston, as well. But I guess a lot of the industry, I guess the fact remains that it's still heavily under Allen Bradley and Siemens. And although you could probably learn quite a few things when it comes to PLC programming on a different platform or on a free, simulation software, I think it's still, there is value in getting the hardware that's in the factories, right? Like the Micrologics that you've mentioned a couple of times, the S7-1200 series, like you can see them in actual machinery right now if you were to walk on, at least in food and beverage, based on my experience, but I'm sure in automotive and oil and gas. And so there is, I think, a learning curve associated with each platform. And so having had that experience with the actual hardware and software is extremely valuable.
Absolutely. It would be easy enough for someone to go on Automation Direct and buy a really, really cheap Click PLC with free software and a Seymour HMI, which now the software is free for. That's fine. I think there you go. I mean, that's perfectly fine if you want to do it. I know I see a lot of integrators use Seymour with Allen Bradley, and I've seen Siemens HMIs with Allen Bradley PLCs. But it would be easy to say that, but my big argument for that is, it kind of gets your toes dipped into the water a little bit, but I don't really see them being used, the PLCs anyway, being used super widespread. It's something that's very isolated. A lot of, I'd say, if you're doing custom skids, if you're building a product, if I was building a product, I might use something like that. Then again, the Siemens product is fairly cheap enough on the S7-1200 stuff that I would put that in any proprietary product that I would build. Maybe even Allen Bradley, depending on the application. But yeah, there's absolutely a way in through that if you want to go the least expensive route. But if you really want to be familiar with most equipment in the United States, it's going to be Allen Bradley and Siemens. In the United States, Siemens seems to run second to Allen Bradley. I've seen a fair amount of Omron and Mitsubishi as well. But I mean, Allen Bradley and Siemens is really the top two. And if you go outside of the US, you work with any European companies, especially German companies, it's just Siemens all the way pretty much most of the time. So that's why I decided to do the Siemens product for the giveaway, because one, it was fairly cost effective for a giveaway that we self-sponsored. I didn't, I think a starter kit from Allen Bradley is double or triple what I paid for the sponsorship on the PLC stuff. Secondly, it worked with factory IO. Factory.io, I think, is the domain for the software. I'm not sure. Vlad, are you familiar with that? It's a wonderful platform for simulation.
Yeah, it's something that I'm looking into. Those of you who, I'll post a link actually in the chat for people to check it out. It's a very interesting, I guess it's a 3D environment where you can hook up to a PLC through your computer, and then you could simulate like a factory environment. Obviously, it's not as intricate as you would see, on a normal production line, but you get anything from like conveyors to robots to, sensors and different like arms to move things around. So you can get quite a bit practice in. We're talking about getting something like this on Solus PLC, but I'm still trying to figure out the format. I think it's an interesting platform.
Oh, absolutely. Again, that was a tool I used in the beginning. I used my Micrologics, I think it was 1100 or 1400 on, and you can interact with the push buttons on the panels and counters and everything. And of course, you can do analog and digital, and yeah, it's absolutely helpful for someone who's visual. I don't know. I think the license is less than a few $100s for the year if you buy it for the year, and that's much cheaper than if you went out and bought a bunch of input devices and output devices that were of that same caliber. So it was absolutely instrumental. I think tools like that are incredibly helpful for the guys coming in, and could be potential, like you said, you're trying to integrate something like that on the Solus PLC, because interactive stuff like that, again, there are, I think, mainly two types of people in the way that they learn. And I think that people can read something and it's locked in, buddy. I mean, it's there and it's, they've got that for all of time. I'm not that guy. I kind of like what you did with your PLC talk when you went back to your solution. I often write down my solutions and, little Excel files and things like that where I can search through. And I think that for people who are hands-on, to be able to go into Factory IO and these other things and test and tinker around, it helps solidify that knowledge into their mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to circle back to our discussion earlier about, posting some of the things, if I see engineers who are, consistently involved in like Factory IO, something as maybe as interesting as that, and posting that on LinkedIn, creating content, just like showcasing fairly like non-complex demos, I'd be very impressed. And I think those are the kind of individuals that I would be looking out for, right, when I'm hiring people. So
no, absolutely.
maybe to give people another idea of things to work on, because again, like not everyone has access to the production floor, and even if they get the PLC, it's always maybe a challenge of communicating with real equipment. Well, you have an option where you can talk to a 3D environment and do a lot of very complicated things in in that software.
Oh, absolutely. More complicated than what you could produce on your desk, at least at start. And I'll tell you, just for anyone who's listening, with Factory IO, and I'm not plugging them, I don't, but it's great software. If you don't have a PLC, they do have a simulated PLC as well that you can program, kind of like function block programming. And so you don't even need a PLC to get going, really, if you don't have to have one. And now you're talking about a completely immersive environment that's 3D that you don't even need any hardware to get started. Again, I would be perfectly happy to see someone working out of something like that to get going.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got many options, right? They do OPC, UA, and DA, so you can really hook up a lot of the simulated PLCs, and people are mentioning them in the comments. So it's quite a bit flexible when it comes to the connections to the software. And I think, I mean, like the industry in general is becoming a lot more aware that your PLC needs to tie into external things, so they're making it easier with the drivers and APIs as well.
Absolutely.
So that definitely makes sense. Dave, do you have any more questions? I think we're coming to a close here shortly.
You have a couple more things, Vlad. First, Manufacturing Hub, nor Preston and Envision are sponsored by any of the companies that we just threw out there, but we could be. So please reach out. But no, beyond that, Preston, I know that we told you, we kind of warned you that we were going to ask you what you thought the future was going to look like for the industry for you at Envision. And with the anticipation that at some point in the future, we're going to have you come on again and talk about this and play this upcoming clip and figure out if you were right or wrong. We're interested to know kind of what you think the future for the industry, for yourself, for Envision is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the future of the industry, everything is going to more collaborative technology. We've noticed that. We do see a merge of OT and IT, which is really cool. A good fair amount of that. I noticed just the other day, PLC Next from Phoenix is a great product pushing into that category. I'd like to get my hands on one of those. But where we're going, like I said, I'd say 6 months from now, I think that you'll see Envision doing many more retrofit projects here in the shop, less service out on the road. And I think we're going to have an employee in another 6 months if we can land the right fit. So in 6 months, that's what I'm looking to see.
No, that is fantastic. And because we've somehow made it almost an hour without doing it, Preston, can you please give us a plug for Envision? Who your customers are looking for, what you do, and who should reach out if they're looking for your sort of services.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want some general information, just head over to envisions.io, or you can email me. We can put the email in the chat below. But generally speaking, we do most things: automation controls, panel fabrication, and consulting around those general areas. So if you're needing troubleshooting, service, commissioning, startup, machine retrofits, and/or replacement components, we've got you covered.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. And then I know we talked through a lot of things. Is there anything else that you feel like we should have asked you, or you'd like to add in?
Truthfully, I don't, guys. We've covered a great range of subject. I'm very, very happy we had this conversation.
No, perfect. Thank you very much, Preston. Vlad, do you have closing comments? Would you like to wrap up? Would you like me to wrap up?
I will let you wrap up, Dave, but thank you very much, Preston. I really appreciate it. I think there's a lot more, questions that I would like to explore, but as Dave mentioned, I guess we've always been past our usual 45 minutes time, but we'll have you back on the show, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about some of the other questions.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks for having me on. This has been a blast, and hopefully we'll be back on in around about 6 months.
Thank you, Preston.
No, fantastic. Appreciate it, Preston. Appreciate everyone for listening to Manufacturing Hub with Vlad and I. Again, if you haven't done so, give us a thumbs up or a clap and hit the subscribe button. Follow our pages, Manufacturing Hub on LinkedIn. Vlad has a YouTube channel, so if you're not one of the nearly 20,000 Solus PLC YouTube subscribers, getting really close, Vlad. It keeps rocket shipping up there. Please go ahead and subscribe to that. Preston and I will shout out Solus PLC if Vlad will not. No, but please give Solus PLC a follow on YouTube to continue and follow along with all of that. And then again, podcast stuff, if you guys are listening on the podcasts. Beyond that, Vlad and I look forward to talking to you guys next Wednesday and probably most Wednesdays after that.
That's right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Talk soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.